Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. Good to see you all for another episode of Monk Chat. Here tonight we have, I'm Ayasoma, and to my right is Bhante Sudaso, and to my left is Bhante Sumano. So welcome to Jens. Welcome to Kazar Friend, Joy, Venerable Vimananyani. Good to see you. Hello to Elaine, Linda, Adine, Ku, Mark, Denise, Mary, Nancy. Good to see you all, friends. And whenever you're ready, feel free to type in some questions. Hello to also our friends on Instagram Live. So any questions you might have, we'll try our best to answer them. You okay, Bhante?
Yeah.
It's spring.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, the tissue.
I thought my hand was invisible, but well, so far there's no questions, so this might be an extremely short monk chat.
Empty monk chat. Yeah. Welcome also to Shadow Label and to Robin. And Elaine says, "Bless you, Bhante."
Thank you.
I have a question.
Great, wonderful. Our resident Gunnar Gunnar. I keep on calling you Gunnar. Has a question.
So, learning about the relevance and importance of jhanas, I don't find somewhat of a guide to reach them. It's more just continue to go into deep meditation and it will happen at some point. I would love some insight, though, into the kind of intensity or length of time needed to reach it, and then also how to work with the aversion to pain, which for me starts to happen around an hour. How to work with that to then continue on positively.
Well, that sounds like 3 different questions, actually, which is great because we had no questions a moment ago.
Yeah. So, Bhante, would you like to paraphrase this so the people online can hear better?
Yeah. So Gunnar, first off, he asked, "What's the significance of jhana?" Then asked about what practical things can be done to enter jhana other than just keep meditating and wait for it, and how long it would take to enter jhana. And finally, he asked how to deal with aversion to pain. So maybe I'll answer the first 2, and then one of you can answer the one about pain. So significance of jhana, well, basically, it's samma samadhi. It's the 8th aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Buddha talked about jhana over and over and over again, literally hundreds of times throughout the suttas. So this is clearly something that's very significant. It's a very important element of developing the path to awakening. So jhana is not something that you can just sweep to the side and ignore. That said, it's quite difficult, and it is conditional, which means it relies upon the conditions that we have in our life. So if our life is very noisy and messy and complicated, then we're not going to get jhana. That's pretty much a guarantee, unless you have really good conditions from past lives. If you live a messy, complicated life, you're not getting jhana. So live a simple, quiet life with few distractions, few involvements. Restrain your senses. So don't get excited by anything you see or hear or smell or so on. Avoid anything which stirs up the mind. So avoid anything which generates mental activity. These are the really critical things. Avoid arguments. Avoid disputes. That's also really important. And yeah, do a lot of meditation every day. And in a few years, you might start to approach jhana. So that's the other thing, is don't expect it to happen quickly. You need patience. Expect it to take several years. And that's several years of dedicated monastic life, mind you. Not several years of half-hearted practice while living a sensualist household life. You're never getting jhana as a sensualist householder. Just write it off. If that's what you're doing, you're not getting jhana. So every now and then you hear people talk about jhana for householders. I'm sorry, that doesn't happen. It happens extremely rarely and only for people who live semi-monastic lives. Realistically, jhana is something which happens for monastics who live a very sincere, dedicated monastic life and who do a lot of meditation. Otherwise, as far as getting into jhana, yeah, it's actually not complicated. Put your mind on your meditation object and keep it there. Don't move your body, don't move your mind. That's it. And you'll enter jhana. That's the simple answer. There's a few little tips and tricks you can do to speed things up along the way, but for the most part, that's all you have to do. It's the surrounding conditions in your life that make the biggest difference, not so much your meditation technique. Is that everything? Okay, does one of you want to talk about pain, aversion to pain?
As it relates to the jhanas, in that, just like your meditation falling to pieces after an hour because of the aversion to pain.
I don't know, I could just say a brief
I
comment
think
about
it's
that.
good if you.
Yeah, so aversion to pain. Yeah, at some point you have to face the fact that the body produces sensations. And whether we like or dislike a sensation is a choice that we make. So sensations are not inherently painful, but rather we choose to hate some sensations. And that's what we call pain. So it's learning to recognize that that's what's going on. We're actually making a decision to hate sensations, and that's what's disturbing our meditation. So learn how to be okay with any sensation that arises. So when a sensation appears, don't run away from it. Don't turn away from it. Don't ignore it. Don't reject it. Just accept this is what's going on right now, and it isn't a problem. If you have that attitude, then it actually won't be a problem. So what makes pain an obstacle to meditation is not the sensation itself, but our aversion to that sensation, our hatred of that sensation. So once you understand that, and I mean understand it experientially, then pain won't be an obstacle for you anymore. It becomes much less of an obstacle. And as I've mentioned a number of times in the past, the shortest, most direct route to overcoming pain is to do very long periods of continuous sitting meditation, like sitting continuously for 3 or 4 hours straight. Do that every day for a couple of weeks, and you will have a much better understanding of pain. Advance warning, this is not a pleasant process, but the results are worth it. Okay?
Thank you, Bante. And Robin asks, do you ever read 2 or more suttas in a row? Or do you think it's better to give them some space? Both. So personally, well, actually, since I was a child, so since even before, falling in love with the suttas, normally whenever I would read something that would appeal to my mind, I could not stop. I could not close the book. And then if it was a particular author that I liked and they had written other books, I would start reading only books written from that author. I remember when I was an adolescent, I was at a certain point only reading Hermann Hesse and then only Luigi Pirandello. And then I would just be very obsessive about whatever was the subject matter. So with the suttas, it's pretty much the same. So when I picked up, actually in the Buddha's words, so this anthology from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, that was the first sort of foray into the suttas, I could not stop And it was so profound. Actually, it was the most incredible book that I had found in my life up until then. So I just, I was like, I was doing a retreat actually. So I was only meditating and reading the suttas, meditating and reading the suttas. So I like to do that from time to time. It's also good not to read at all. So I have also retreats where you close everything, put down the books and just focus on meditation. But sometimes I also like to do retreats where I'm just reading the words of the Buddha. And this past retreat, for example, I focused only on the Anguttara Nikaya. So I was reading, over and over and over again. The suttas from that particular Nikaya. And I found it extremely useful. But sometimes I like to just pick one sutta and contemplate it over and over again over the course of several weeks, or perhaps even just a fragment of a sutta, and use it sort of like a mantra. So bring it with me as I go about my day, as I go about things here at the monastery, and contemplate it. So it really depends. I think Bhante Sumano has a similar approach, maybe, or definitely he did both Samyutta Nikaya and Anguttara Nikaya this past retreat. So maybe you want to share a bit about that? No.
It's the same answer, basically. So.
Okay, great. I told you. See, we also have the same outfit. Very similar. And Joy says, when is your monastery open for visitation or retreats? That's very easy. So it's currently open for visitation by appointment. So you can write an email if you live close by and try to arrange that. And retreats, we have retreats for residents currently. So we are accepting residents, but long-term residents. So if you're interested in a long-term residency, comes with retreats. Also then write us an email. And as far as like when it will be actually open to the public at large, well, that depends really on lots of different causes and conditions, namely what happens with the coronavirus. And Adine asks, I've been trying to wrap my mind around this distinction, but could you explain the difference between delusion, moha, and ignorance, avidya, or are they synonyms? Any of the Bhantes? Bhante Siddhasa?
So they are nearly synonymous. Didn't we actually get this question recently? I feel like I just answered it recently.
I asked you several months ago, last year, actually.
I thought we just got it like a week or two ago.
I don't think so.
It was a similar question.
Similar. Okay. So moha and avidya are very similar. But if we want to talk about a difference, then avidya literally means not knowing. So lack of knowledge, so not knowing the Four Noble Truths. That's actually the standard definition. Or not knowing the three characteristics. That's another standard definition. Or not knowing emptiness would be another way of saying that. So just not knowing, like you've never heard it. So since you've never heard it, you've never looked for it in your experience. Delusion, on the other hand, is when you believe something is true that is not true. And these are similar because, for example, if you've never heard the Four Noble Truths, then you might believe that happiness can be found through getting what you want. Or you might believe that some things in the world are permanent, such as your self-identity. Or you might believe that you have a soul. So these are delusions which can arise based on ignorance. So you might say then that ignorance is the more fundamental condition from which delusion arises. But fundamentally, it's not easy to piece apart delusion and ignorance because they're so tightly connected.
Thank you, Bhante. And Nancy asks, how did you know you wanted to become monastics? Well, maybe Bhante Sumano can start and we'll go.
Sure. It actually happened the first time that I saw a monastic, and something just clicked. Actually, that's it.
Come on, give us a little bit more.
Hey, he's showing his Zen answers. It's fine. It's fine. Now, brevity is the soul of wit, said some famous dead guy.
All right, and Bhante Siddhaso?
How did I know I wanted to become a monastic? Through practicing meditation and studying Buddhism, it pretty quickly transformed my life dramatically. And it was the only thing which really seemed to make sense as a path of happiness and fulfillment. So as a teenager, I had very strong disenchantment. So I saw that all the ordinary worldly goals that were being presented to me, so pursuing relationships and jobs and money and higher education and sensual enjoyments and entertainment and all that, it just all seemed really shallow and hollow and pointless and infantile and silly to me. But then when I started getting into Buddhism, I was like, oh, this is something which is actually meaningful and profound and which brings true, genuine happiness. So actually within a year, I was already thinking about becoming a monk, within a year of when I started practicing.
Great, thank you. And well, I guess it's my turn. How did I know I wanted to become a monastic? I did not know. That's why I wasted so many years. I always wanted to understand how things really were. And I was very fascinated by these sort of glimpses that I had growing up that remember, for example, first encountering the teachings from Marx, where he talks about a superstructure and how that basically influences pretty much who we think we are. And so I was finally, I found something that was kind of an explanation of my experience of life. So I was very much adamant of destroying the superstructure so that I could fully understand reality. And I started navigating, like getting into so many different fields, trying to pursue this, namely fashion, art, design, different subcultures, yeah, lots of different interesting realms of existence. And then when I found monasticism, I realized, oh, this is what I wanted to do all this time, but I had no idea that I was supposed to go into religion to into that route. It was really so foreign to me, religion, ironically. It's like the last place I would have looked to find answers or to sort of do the work. So then for, I guess, good karma, late, but better late than never, I found the teachings of the Buddha and I started pretty much living like a monastic. And then at a certain point, I felt like I was already a monastic. I mean, I was acting like a monastic, living like a monastic. I'm like, I better be a monastic instead of doing this sort of dysfunctional lay person. It's like, better be a functional monastic, or at least try to do so. So that's my story.
I like that. Better to be a functional monastic than a dysfunctional lay person.
And Cows, our friend, asks, I was wondering, how do people deal with the precept against killing when having to deal with a parasite like a tapeworm? Bhante Sumano?
They take prescription medication.
He's very... Is it pithy? Pithy? Is that English? Pithy
Yeah,
That is
answers.
English, but I don't know. Does that apply?
Yeah. Pithy is something which is very short but full of meaning. Yeah. Okay, that was easy. Next one.
That's nice.
All right. And Kumu says, I saw what is the name of the sutta on transcending gender? And Nancy, who's on top of it, replied, Anguttara Nikaya 751.
Great.
Nancy also asks, what do your days look like structurally? Walking, sleeping, tasks, practice, etc. Bhante Sumara.
Sure. I'll give a more elaborate answer, perhaps.
Great.
But no, I don't think it sounds quite boring, actually, when you lay it out like that. Because we have a general schedule, which is waking up in time for morning chanting and meditation at 5:30 a.m. Then there's breakfast at 7 a.m. Then the live streams, which you're all aware of, at 8 a.m. Then we have work from 9 to 11-ish. Then we have lunch at 11. And then the day is basically open for practice, usually until 6 p.m. when we meet for chanting and meditation for about an hour. And then we're back with the live streams. And that's pretty much the daily schedule, except for weekends. We do alms round and a few other different things. So there are the scheduled waking, sleeping, eating, etc. And then the practice is generally open-ended. So we tend to do some sitting, walking, going to the nearby nature reserve, sometimes going to the cemetery, different places, parks around here. And then doing events in the community also. So inviting community members to practice either here, say on the grounds, or going somewhere like the park or the cemetery. So it's very actually bare bones, but you can choose your own mileage, I like to think of it as. So you can take Bhante Sudaso up on his offer of meditating for 3 hours straight, actually, because there's time and space to do that. Or you can study the suttas, or whatever you see as fit, as the Buddha would say.
If you want a specific, send us an email and we'll send you a copy of our current schedule. That's the answer I was expecting you to give.
I was tempted, but...
All right, and Nancy is also asking, what were the processes that each of you took prior to monastic life that brought you to the decision to become monastics?
Didn't we just answer this?
It's slightly different. What were the processes?
Like, what did we have to do in order to come to the decision?
I'll take this one since the venerables are hesitant. Well, it actually so happened that right before Bhante Sudaso and I met and started Buddhist Insights, I was running, I was a freelancer, and I had decided to give up a lot of like the clients, the sort of corporate clients. So I was literally like very much freelancing, as in like free lancing, and then running an indie project in Rockaway Beach that was volunteer based, zero budget, zero pay, So then when I met Bhante Sudaso and we decided to start Buddhist Insights, and I was fairly new to Buddhism, and I hear the concept of dana, so not charging, everything free. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that. I know how to do that. I've got quite a bit of experience, all volunteer-based. So we started the organization, and that's basically from there. As I was saying earlier, I started living like a monastic. Just by it's not that I ever made a choice in the way. It's not that I was like, and now I'm going to live like a monastic. It was more like, well, I'm doing this practice, and there are these things to be done in order to offer the Dhamma to different people. So I was kind of living day by day. And as you practice in this way, as I was practicing in this way, my mind was becoming happier and happier, happier and happier. The more we practice in accordance to Dhamma, the more suffering starts ceasing. So then after a while, I was like, why on earth would I go back to, what I was doing beforehand? so that naturally, the aspiration to become happier and happier arises in the mind. It's not a stretch.
I think I already answered it.
Okay, there's still
Okay, next question.
Because our friend says, a Pali question. In the homage to the Buddha, Namo Tassa Bhagavato, what is the grammatical role of Namo? Is it a verb? Is it used in other contexts too? Or is it purely for this formulation? Bhante Sudaso?
It's actually a noun here. So the root of the word is nam, which actually literally means to bend. Because when you are bowing to something, you are bending your body. So namo you could translate as homage or as bows. And it's used in all kinds of different formulations. It's just a word, and it has many different forms, noun forms, verb forms, various different forms that you'll find. And actually the commonly repeated phrase namaste is from the same root. Namaste just means homage to you or bows to you. So it's very commonly used without people really knowing what it means. But it's actually from the same root as Namo. But yeah, if you're really interested in Pali, you should just learn Pali. It's not a difficult language, in my opinion.
It's true. It's pretty straightforward.
It's a lot easier than Chinese anyway.
Definitely, but nothing is more difficult than Chinese.
That's incorrect. Apparently, there are languages that are harder to learn.
That's hard to believe. But I will acknowledge that. And Bhavani asks, is getting a female or male body according to Paskamma?
Yes.
Okay, next question. This is great. We should just give all the questions to Bhante Sumano.
He's like the oracle. Instead of the oracle of Delphi, we have the oracle of Jamaica. And Angela says, hello. I just wanted to let Bhante Sumano know that I woke up this morning very alert after a dream about flying cockroaches.
Yep, they will do that. They'll also wake you up if you have them in your home.
I have to say, that talk made me very grateful for window screens.
Yeah, the first flying cockroach I met was in India at 2 a.m. in the bathroom. And everybody, I think, in the building heard me. Also because they're not like the tiny cockroaches I don't see in in like the, I don't know, like in the United States or the
When I
UK.
first saw those, I didn't realize people called those cockroaches. So I was like, please, it's not a cockroach.
It's true. It's like a giant thing. Oh, and Robin says, I have been working my way through the Majjhima Nikaya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Good, good. Keep going.
And because our friend says, I like the stream technology upgrade. So do we. Shout out to StreamYard, the new thingy that we're using. And Bhavani asks, Namaste, how do you meditate in summer and in winter? It's summer in India. I feel dizzy as I'm confused in a desert daytime when I'm trying to meditate.
Well, we meditate basically the same as we meditate during the spring and fall. In the winter, we don't meditate outdoors very much. So central heating is a beautiful thing. The summers here are not as bad as they are in tropical areas of the world. So we can still do a lot of outdoor meditation during the summer. In fact, we do tend to meditate outdoors a lot during the summer. It's really only during the winter that it's a bit inconvenient and we spend most of our time indoors. But yeah, when you're dealing with really hot conditions like that, sometimes there's not really anything you can do. And it's interesting, in the suttas, the Buddha said that during the summer, so he lived in India, and he said that during the summer in the afternoons, he would just rest. So if even the Buddha would rest in the afternoons in India, then I think you can be excused for having a hard time meditating. But make the most of the other times of day. I actually knew of a couple monks who, when they were living in Thailand, during the summertime, they would reverse their sleep schedule. So they would sleep during the day, and then they would be awake meditating all night.
Thank you, Bante. And Johan, or Johan probably, I don't know.
Johan?
Johan
Probably Johan.
Sure.
says, has anyone read the article in Harper's Magazine, Lost in Thought? It's the story of a woman who had a psychotic breakdown after she started meditating. It's not clear if meditation caused the breakdown, but I wonder if the Buddha ever talked about the dark side of meditation. So I personally did not read the article in Harper's Magazine, Lost in Thought, because I don't know what Harper's Magazine is, but I have read articles, or an article, I don't remember, along the same lines. I believe it's actually a woman who attended a Goenka retreat, if I remember correctly, and then committed suicide afterwards, if I remember correctly. And so then there was this sort of conversation on the issues that can arise. So my understanding there is twofold. That the person actually had previous mental issues that either were not diagnosed, or perhaps the person actually had them diagnosed, but then fell on the belief that meditation was this sort of cure for their mental issues. And that's a very flawed way of thinking, because it's kind of like if you break a leg. So thinking that meditation is going to cure the leg, heal the leg, is a little bit of a stretch, right? What you want to do is go to a doctor, fix your leg, and then meditate with the leg as it's healing, as someone who is professional, who has learned how to heal the leg, helps you in along the path. The other thing is, also what kind of teacher are you working with? So it's important to always rely on people who have an understanding of the situation, and also of different experiences that can happen in people's minds. And the other thing specific about this story is the Goenka Center. Actually, they deal with so many people. They have centers throughout the world. So when there's not a pandemic, they deal with millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people. So having one or two people who have this sort of experience is a really tiny percentage that can happen, just because they're so popular, just because so many people go there. So meditation per se actually is not, does not have a dark side, which is why I'm not aware of the Buddha ever talking about sort of the dark side of meditation. Our mind is full of darkness, and with meditation practice, we dispel that darkness. But we need to have someone who guides us along the way. So if we think that we are, experimenting with ourselves, we actually, had an experience of that at one of our retreats, where someone was not following the instructions that were given on the retreat, but they had read a book and they were doing some Kundalini practices during this retreat instead of mindfulness of the body, as Bhante Sudaso was teaching. And they had never actually studied with a Kundalini teacher. So they brought themselves to almost the point of a psychotic breakdown. But because Bhante Sudazo, hasn't started the day before yesterday, he managed to understand what was going on. And so did, the other members of the Sangha at Empty Cloud at the time. And so we were able to deal with the situation skillfully. So it's very important that when we address, start any type of spiritual practice, we start it with humility, and we start by asking questions, by going, relying on people who are ahead of us in the path, instead of having the arrogance of knowing that we know better. Because if we think we know it all, well, first of all, then why are we even practicing? If we know it all, there's no path, nothing to do, What is the purpose of all of this? But that arrogance can be very harmful to ourselves and also to others. So these are my thoughts on the matter. I don't know if Bhante Sudazo will.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit to that. First off, everything that she said. But another thing is that I also didn't read the article that you mentioned, or the one that Ayasoma mentioned, I don't think. But I came across another similar one a while back about a young man who had gone to a Goenka retreat and had a super far out trippy experience, which he said basically left him antisocial and non-functional in ordinary life for several months afterwards. And then he went and he talked to a Buddhist monk about it a while later, and the Buddhist monk was like, oh, you just got a really deep glimpse of impermanence. But because you had no framework of Buddhist philosophy, no understanding of Buddhist practice, then you didn't know how to handle it. You didn't know what to do with that experience. You didn't know how to relate to it or how to process it. And that was the problem. The monk was like, well, the experience you had was actually perfectly normal from a Buddhist standpoint. But because you lacked the supporting framework of understanding, then you weren't able to integrate it into your life in a suitable way. So what I actually, and the article was actually meant to talk about the dangers of meditation. But what I took away from the article was, it's really important to understand that Buddhist meditation is not something that you practice in isolation, but it's something that is practiced as part of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's something that's practiced as part of a broader cultivation of morality, generosity, and wisdom. And it's something which relies upon a thorough understanding of what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, what are the foundational principles of Buddhist thought, what is the goal of Buddhist practice. So why are we practicing Buddhist practice in the first place? So you need to understand these things intellectually in order to be able to have a wholesome relationship to meditation practice. And also just one final little bit here. Buddhist meditation is not a substitute for psychotherapy. It is not a substitute for psychological treatment. Buddhist meditation is a path to enlightenment, but it is only one part of that path. And if we're trying to practice Buddhist meditation without the rest of the path, then yeah, of course bad things happen. It's kind of like if you go to your nutritionist and your nutritionist says, well, okay, you should be eating bread and vegetables and fruit. And you're like, okay, I'll just eat nothing but fruit. Nothing but fruit. That'll be great. The nutritionist said fruit, I'll eat nothing but fruit. And then a few weeks later, when the person is deathly ill and dying of fruitarianism, then they say, well, clearly the nutritionist didn't tell me about the dark side of fruit. Well, the nutritionist actually gave you really good advice. You just weren't following it. Even worse, though, is if you just find some random guy on the street and he tells you, eat fruit. Fruit is good for you. And then you start eating nothing but fruit and start dying. Well, and then you go around telling the world about the dark side of fruit. Writing articles for Harper Magazine called Lost in Fruit. Well, the problem's not the fruit. Okay. I'm going to stop there.
The dark side of fruit is a great title. That might be an upcoming Dhamma talk. All right. And oops. 1 second. And J. Kedrup Tasker, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, says, do you approach ordination as something that is ideally a lifelong commitment or a training open to all that one can leave after a time? Bhante Sumano.
Well, you always have a choice, so you always can leave or stay. It's up to you. No one can force you to be a monastic for any length of time. For me personally, just going day by day, actually. Just reflecting. Is this something that's beneficial, helpful? Is this something that's increasing my wholesome qualities, decreasing my unwholesome qualities? And if it is, then I should keep going. And if it's not, investigating and being honest with myself. If there comes a time when this form doesn't work anymore, then to change form.
Thank you, Bhante. Bhante Sudaso?
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's everyone.
Is it?
No? Okay, just one.
I mean, I already answered, so up to you both.
We have a bunch of questions, so we should keep going.
Well, I'll answer. Lifetime commitment.
Just relax.
And also only one life, as in awakening this lifetime. And Adine says, what was the primordial origin of craving, tanha? Without things to crave at the beginning, how could it even arise in the first place? I see Bhante Sudaso smiling. You want to take that?
Well, there's a really lovely chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya. Do you want to click it so it shows on the screen?
Yes.
There's a lovely chapter in the Samyutta Nikaya called Without Discoverable Beginning. And the Buddha says, this samsara has no discoverable beginning. A first point cannot be found of beings wandering on, hindered by ignorance and obstructed by craving. In other words, your question simply doesn't apply. It's like asking, what's the starting point of a circle? Well, a circle doesn't have a starting point. So it's the same. There is no primordial origin of craving. Craving is simply the fabric of samsara. There is no beginning point. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante. And Andre says, hello, Venerables. Hope you're well. May you be well, healthy, and happy. Oh, thank you very much. What happened to the other Bhante? I don't see him in videos anymore. So if you're talking about Venerable Bandai... Oh, Bhante Pamuto. No. Sorry. I was like, Venerable Bandai was here last week. And Bhante Pamuto is currently in Queens. So he's... with our friends from Queens, from the Indonesian Buddhist Vihara. And Nancy says, you inspired a t-shirt slogan, I am a dysfunctional layperson.
It's a good
great.
thing we don't wear t-shirts.
Yeah. And Robin asks, how do you give yourself more energy if you're feeling sleepy while meditating? Bhante Sumano?
This is interesting because I rarely get sleepy in meditation. But some things that I've tried are opening my eyes. So if I'm meditating with my eyes closed and I'm dozing off, then just opening the eyes can actually just, because you now have more stimuli coming in, it can energize the mind a little bit. I've also tried controlling my breathing. So I might hold my breath for a little bit and aware of that. And that can sort of perk the body up a little bit. Done sparingly, obviously, and then just letting it go and going back into natural breathing. Also doing insight meditation practices. So instead of focusing on the breath or on the body, which are very calming and very soothing, to do something that's a little more active with the mind. So investigating something. But even, the Buddha talks about investigating dhammas, investigating phenomena. So you can also contemplate certain qualities. You might reflect on a teaching. You might reflect on the qualities of the Buddha, recollect your own virtue. There are all these things that you can do with the mind that are still wholesome and conducive to meditation practice. If that's not working, then stand up. And yeah, that's what I do.
Great. Thank you, Bante. I will just add this actually works wonders, pulling your earlobes, and then also picturing yourself like dying, decomposing in that moment. And do you want to actually die like all sleepy and drooling? What a sad way to die. But instead, thinking thoughts of awakening, that's very more energizing.
Actually, yeah, contemplating your own death is a great way to energize the mind. And also picturing your body decomposing in stages can also bring some urgency to the practice, because then you're like, well, yeah, I can be lazy, like Ayasoma said, but if I stand up and have a heart attack, boom, what a waste. That would be very inconvenient.
Yeah. And Joy asks, is our last thought when we die determine where we're reborn, or is it the summation of the good and bad deeds we created in this life?
Well, first off, I'll just say that the Buddha said that the full detailed understanding of karma is only accessible to fully enlightened beings. So otherwise, we can only get a general understanding of the overall principles. So to answer your question, the answer is neither. So it's not your last thought when you die, and it's not the summation of good and bad deeds created in this life, but rather what determines your next rebirth can be any of the choices you've made, either any point in this life or in past lives. Or it may be the confluence of many different choices you've made. But it's not so easy to say exactly which one is going to be the dominant effect. So I have heard a number of people who have the belief that it's just the last thought in your mind at the moment you die. But there's no basis for this in the suttas. I'm not sure where that idea comes from, whether it appeared in later commentarial literature or what, but it's definitely not in the suttas. But rather, yeah, it's out of all the karma that you've created in this life and in past lives, some of that is going to come to the forefront and determine the conditions for your next life. So the Buddha says you don't know when karma is going to ripen. Sometimes karma produces its result in this life, sometimes in your next life, and sometimes in some distant future life after that. So you don't know. And this can be a little intimidating because you might think, well, I've been such a good person this entire life. Surely I'm getting a good rebirth. Well, bad news. 10 lifetimes ago, you were a serial killer. And that's about to come to fruit. Oopsie. Yeah.
So for Robin, you can recollect that when you feel sleepy. And Linda shares that Pali is pretty easy to learn. That's great. And Huang Yong says, hello, good morning. I thought you not follow the Theravada Buddha teaching. Well, it depends on how you define the Theravada Buddha teaching, because there are so many different ways to practice Theravada. So we both follow it and not follow it according to the different flavors of Theravada. Just like we follow some Mahayana, but we don't follow some other Mahayana. Fundamentally, what we follow is the teachings of the Buddha.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And Cows, our friend, shares, if Samma Samadhi is probably out of reach for lay people, why even try? Just on the off chance that it may work for us even in adverse conditions of lay life, is it not better to focus on Sila then? Well, first of all, I would say definitely focus on Sila. Everyone has to focus on Sila, whether with robes or without robes. And definitely focus on developing every single aspect of the path, whether you have a monastic form or a lay form. So don't want to speak for Bhante Sudazo, but I will just say that I think that the reason why he said what he said earlier was to emphasize or de-emphasize, actually, the obsession that as convert Buddhists we normally have on meditation and on, just cultivating one particular aspect of the path rather than embracing the full path. And so if we were saying earlier, if you only, focus, you just try to get Samma Samadhi, but without developing all the other aspects of the path, well, good luck with that. And that is true both with robes and without robes, both with, 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 precepts, 311 precepts. It doesn't matter. But yeah, put right effort, but in every single aspect of the path, Sila, Samadhi, and Panya.
So I'd just like to clarify on that. So earlier I did not say it's impossible for lay people to attain jhana. What I said is that it's impossible for lay people who live a messy, noisy, complicated life to attain jhana. That's what I said. And I also said that if you're living a very quiet, peaceful, semi-monastic life, then jhana can be possible, even as a lay person. But the more concerning thing is that the question you're asking seems to imply that you're still subconsciously relating to Buddhist practice from a YOLO perspective. You're still just thinking in terms of this one life. Even if there is 0 chance of you getting jhana in this life, you should still practice samadhi, because that will make it a lot easier in your next life. So it's always important to remember that Buddhism is a practice which takes many, many lifetimes. And this may be your final life, but it probably isn't. So yes, even if you think that you're not going to attain enlightenment in this life, you should still cultivate the path, because it will make it easier in your next life.
Thank you. And Original Mind asks a question directly to Bhante Sudazo. What is your thought on what Kamma is, and why Buddha Dhamma, the path to the transcendence of karma? The whole of that is admirable friendship. The whole of the holy life is friends. What is Kamma, and why is the whole of its transcendence friendship?
Well, first off, I don't think this is a question which needs to be me answering it. I think anyone can answer these questions, but I'll answer them if you want me to.
Well, it's directed to you, so
Okay.
They want to hear your personal take.
What is Kamma? Well, Kamma is action, or it's intentional action, and Kamma produces results, which is what we call vipaka. So that's it, basically. Every choice you make produces a result, and the result that you get is in line with the choice that you've made. So if you, for example, in the Chula Kamma Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha gives very practical examples. He says, if you injure people, then in the future, you'll have a lot of physical health problems. Very simple example. He also says, if you're generous to other people, then in future lives, you'll be wealthy. Again, you can see the connection. And similarly, if you help other people practice the path to awakening, then in the future, your own practice will be easier. This is actually the basic principle of the Bodhisattva path. By helping others attain awakening, then you're also making it a lot easier for yourself. As for why the whole of the spiritual life is spiritual friendship, having good friends, it's because it's incredibly difficult to do this by ourselves. There are such things as Pacceka Buddhas and Samma Sambuddhas, so people who attain enlightenment without instruction, but they're extraordinarily rare because they require extremely precise conditions cultivated over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes, thousands of lifetimes, millions of lifetimes even. So the rest of us, in order to get much quicker results, we help each other. So we live in communities where we instruct each other and encourage each other and support each other in practicing wholesome virtues that lead to awakening. Okay.
Thank you, Bante. And Linda says, I hear that opening that third eye can be terrifying if you're not prepared for it.
I don't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, we don't really talk about that in Buddhism.
Sorry, I was looking at the Venerables hoping that they could address the third eye, but it seems that out of the three, none are familiar with the third eye.
Oh, I'm familiar with it. It just doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism.
Yeah, exactly. But Lloyd says, we have a family member who is struggling and we believe meditation would help. How do you suggest introducing meditation or Buddhism to a complete beginner who may not immediately be open to it?
Honestly, I think introducing meditation to someone who's not open to it is not going to have beneficial results. And that's because, in my experience anyway, people have to have a desire and a motivation to actually approach the practice. And part of that's because it's very difficult. It's a difficult practice. And in order to keep up with it, in order to have the confidence and the endurance actually to not just put in the effort to say, sit down somewhere and get to a quiet place, but to sustain that and to be with the ups and downs, you need an innate motivation. I say innate in the sense that coming from within. Usually when people are struggling, especially if they're not Buddhist practitioners, you need to approach the situation a bit more in a roundabout way and sort of sprinkling hints and creating moments for them to come to certain realizations on their own. So it can be actually, since Lloyd, we know you, if you're going, you and your family are going somewhere. I don't know if this family member lives nearby. But if you're going to something like to a temple or what have you, then inviting them to come, not necessarily saying that they need to meditate or do X, Y, Z, but to practice actually sila, for example, to practice generosity, to practice wholesomeness. I don't know what this person is struggling with, but practicing generosity and just practicing lightness of heart by being a good and kind person alleviates so much of the anxiety that people deal with on a day-to-day basis, alleviates so much of the self-worth issues that people have, so much of the remorse, regret that they have. And they also see that the problems that they have, that they're experiencing, they seem very large when looked through our own camera lens. But when we get a wider picture, especially through helping others, and through practicing with others, we see we're all suffering in one way, shape, or form, some to greater degrees than others. But it takes the sting out of the personal struggle that we're carrying on our backs. We start to see that we're not just this lonely, miserable person who's dealing with all of these terrible things, but there are other people that are also dealing with terrible things, who we have the opportunity to help, and who we also have the opportunity to rely on. So that's what I would say. Don't approach it as an academic exercise or a course, mindfulness-based stress reduction, or some workshop they need to go to on the weekend, but make it something that's actually quite organic. You genuinely trying to help a friend, a family member, by showing them what's worked for you and inviting them to try it out. That's what I think anyway. If you try the style of passing them, say, a book or a pamphlet or telling them to sit down for however many minutes, it might work, but it might also create some aversion that then just turns them off actually completely.
Thank you, Bante. And Hwanha Young is asking, am I right? The leader monk should not allow the bhikkhuni to wear cloth like this, same as the monk wear cloth. So I think you're referring to how we're wearing the robes. So are you right No, you're wrong. And to clarify, actually, so here at Empty Cloud Monastery, we're a very conservative monastery. So we actually follow the original teachings of the Buddha. So getting back to your previous question where you were saying whether we were Theravada or not, well, it depends on how you define it. So there are certain customs that have started in Theravada countries that are actually later inventions, and they're not even the product of Asian culture, but rather they're actually the product of colonization. So when the Brits, for example, colonized Burma or colonized Sri Lanka, they were pretty horrified that actually monks were wearing bare shoulder, etc. So you'll see also a lot of monastics, for example, from Sri Lanka will cover up here in the West as a sort of retinue for heritage from those times. But in particular, they were very concerned with the female body being in one particular shape or form. So you'll see it both for monastics and lay people. But if you go, for example, to Thailand, you see all these paintings, for example, at Wat Po in Bangkok, where the bhikkhunis are depicted. I think it's from the 19th century, and they have the traditional traditional outfit as designed by the Buddha, actually. Or if you go to Sri Lanka and you see depictions of Sanghamitta, she's wearing exactly this outfit, like this, very traditional. And so actually Buddhism is the only religion that has the same outfit for everyone, really, any monastic. So here we're just practicing the way that the Buddha designed it to be. So we're very conservative. And I hope that everybody will become more conservative instead of taking up, customs from Catholicism. I'm originally from Italy. And, the nuns there have lots of different attire. I don't think we need that in Buddhism. No.
Also, who do you think is the leader monk here? I'll give you a hint. The leader monk is the one who's sitting between the other two monks.
Well, he might say the leader monk should not allow the bhikkhunis. So the leader monk, I allow bhikkhunis.
just to be clear here. But yeah, as Ayasoma said, this is how bhikkhunis have dressed since the time of the Buddha, right up until the 19th century. It's only a very recent invention to try to make female monks wear extra clothing. It's not Buddhism. It's something very, very recent.
Yeah, and same goes, by the way, for the lay people, lay women. So if you see depictions from back in the days, actually in Sri Lanka, they were topless. In Thailand, the women would have just a little sash. That was how it was normally how they would go. So all, for example, the usual attire, cover up everything, that comes from my country. See, this instant karma. That's when you go to the Vatican, when you go to the Sistine Chapel, the St. Peter's Basilica, all those signs, they were copied and pasted and brought in the East last century. So I think we can send them back to the sender.
Return to sender.
Yeah, return to sender. And be proud of this incredible religion that the Buddha created.
Yeah, people are only just now in the last few decades starting to come to the idea that women and men are equal. But the Buddha already figured that out 2,500 years ago. He was far ahead of his time. Actually,
he went further. It's not about equality of men and women. It's just that these are all conventions. Who cares? Throw them out. Transcend them. Original Mind says, Bhante Sudaso, I hope my question doesn't seem troll-like. I find it curious that karma is the substance that consciousness is made of, and karma is fabricated from ignorance.
I don't see the problem here. Yeah, I don't see the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, what's the big deal? Next question.
Good to see you, Andy. Good friend. And Dean says Bhante Suddhasa could have done stand-up. We'll keep it in mind. Maybe that will be the next talk, stand-up.
I was thinking the dark side of fruit.
And Jens says, I have all the answers in laughter, Bhante Suddhasa. You provide a great amount of humor. You have lots of fans. And M says, speculative question. Why is there anything at all rather than nothing? Wittgenstein once said, it is not how the world is mystical, but that it is the mystical. Thank you, 3. You're very cute. Anyone wants to pick? Thank you for the cute. I'll take the cute and I'll pass the question to one of the 2 venerables.
My answer is going to be very short. So.
Good. This needs a short answer.
Too many words.
Good answer.
All right.
You're thinking about it too much. The question is not why do things appear to exist? That's the wrong question. The question is how do we get free of suffering? That's the right question. So stop asking yourselves these weird, pointless philosophical questions and just ask yourself, how can I get free of suffering? That's it.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. And Andy says, Bhante Suddhasa, in silent illumination practice, as I understand it, it is generally taught that the eyes are open, but not fixed on anything in particular. I have heard you give a silent illumination guided meditation without revealing that you're doing so. Tricky. But I don't believe that I've ever heard you recommend to have eyes open during this practice. I found value in doing this practice with eyes open and with eyes closed in lots of other practices. Do you personally think...
It got cut off.
Yeah, Facebook did a little tricky thing. So we only see, do you personally think? So maybe you can deduct.
Yeah, well... honestly, I've actually had success with eyes open or closed during silent illumination practice. And most of the teachers I've spoken to similarly say that although usually one gets better results with eyes open, it is also perfectly fine to do this practice with eyes closed. So I actually do from time to time point out that it's commonly done with eyes open. But again, I've had success with both ways, and teachers of this practice also say it works both ways. But yeah, it does generally work better with eyes open. That's true.
Great, thank you. And Jack says, can you ever escape the cycle of karma, or is a better way of thinking of it is embracing and accepting the flow of universal energy, which is liberation? And that cycle of karma, put as much effort as you can until like you start falling apart. Oops, I forgot to click your End it. You've embraced it without discoverable beginning. So time to try something new. And Mark says, good book about a lay couple attaining jhanas, practicing the jhanas from the Venerable Pao Sayadaw. Very good book.
Have you read it?
No, but
It looks like I'm not the only stand-up comedian here.
All right. Andrew says, yes, if conditions are favorable, I look forward to seeing you all in a few weeks. Yes, sadhu. We look forward to seeing you. And Celestino says, lay followers can establish silas, brahmavihara, and follow the Dhamma. But to see the Dhamma, one needs to be master of the mind and control perfectly the thoughts. Is this correct? What should be done to increase concentration?
Of course you need to master your mind, naturally. What can be done to increase concentration? Well, I already spoke about that earlier. But just to reiterate, practice the entire Noble Eightfold Path. There's many places in the suttas. Actually, the Buddha says that the equipment for samadhi, which supports the development of Samma Samadhi, is the other 7 aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. It says, what is the support for Samma Samadhi? Well, it's samma ditti, samma sankappa, samma vacha, samma, etc., etc. So if you want good concentration, well, practice the other 7 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path. But yeah, I mean, of course, if you want strong concentration, become a monastic. And there's a reason why this form has been around as long as the Buddha has. It's because it works. It's great.
All right, and Original Mind says, interesting, maybe it's because Saturn, Lord of Karma, is exalted in Libra relationships. Libra is ruled by Venus, so Siddhartha at his Saturn return at 29 years old. Just a thought. I think we're getting into astrology here, so I would say we can stick to Dhamma. And because our friend says, I've been studying Pali and I don't find it very easy at all. 3 genders, 8 noun cases, so many different declensions, conjugations, depending on word ending, not to discourage others though.
Well, as somebody who's been studying Chinese for 4 years now, let me tell you, Pali's easy. Just stick with it. So it is quite a bit different from English, but it's actually remarkably similar in style and format to Latin. And also the more Latin derivative languages like Italian and Spanish also have some resemblance to Pali. But then some other European languages like German are not so close. So it depends upon what your native language is, but you might find it not so hard. So like Ayasoma, who grew up with Italian, it's actually not so difficult if you're starting from that basis. I studied Latin as a child, so again, it's not so difficult from that basis.
Yeah, but I also, more is that when I was a teenager, I studied 5 years of Latin and 5 years of ancient Greek, wondering every day why the hell I had to do that. And 20 years later,
comes in handy.
Yeah, I was like, oh, what a gift. Oh, that's great, because the grammar is really easy. I mean, it's really the same. So even though it's been quite a long time, I understand the workings, etc. So it's somewhat intuitive. And M asks, have any of you read Nanaviya Thera's writings? What do you think of his existentialist approach to the Dhamma? I have not. Have any of the venerables?
I've read a fair bit.
Same.
Your turn. You haven't talked much.
I was just going to say it didn't resonate with me, so that's my answer.
I have to say, I'm loving your answers tonight. And if you were the only monk answering things, we would be done with the whole thing in 5 minutes. Anyway, it's been many, many years since I read anything by Bhante Ñāṇavīra. I do recall I appreciated much of what he had to offer, but I also felt that he was radically off the mark on many points. So I would read through one of his books, and about 50% of it I would find brilliant, and 50% I would find infuriating. So I think that he actually had some really deep insights into the nature of Dhamma, but he was also way off the mark on a number of things, as demonstrated by the fact that he eventually committed suicide based upon a deep misunderstanding of the Dhamma. But he did have some remarkable insights. It was just mixed in with some delusion that really tainted it all. So I value the fact that I read his books. But yeah, you have to be careful if you read his books. There's a lot of wrong view mixed in with all the right view.
Great, thank you on this. And Jet says, was Yeshua, Jesus, a bodhisattva? His ascension seems a lot like the rainbow light body transformation some awakened ones experience after living constant lives of light and love. I mean, there was a time actually where I was wondering exactly the same question. Now I stopped. And the reason why I stopped is because it's just sort of in the realm of hypothesis. And is it really beneficial to actually do all this speculation? Also, in particular, on the life of Jesus, there is very, very little information. So pretty much in that kind of way it's fascinating because since it's an empty canvas, you can create all sorts of like narratives and screenplays. And so I used to be into screenwriting when I was a lay person. So I think that's how I started also, like creating all these stories of the Bodhisattva. Maybe we can stop and just practice. And Original Mind says, seems that karma is astrology and astrological factors are the substrate of consciousness. From ignorance comes karma, from karma comes consciousness.
No. Okay, next question. Yeah, stop talking about astrology. It's not Buddhism. And it's fine if you want to do whatever you want to do. It just doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism. So you're not going to get useful answers from us if you talk about astrology.
And Jet says, there is no leader monk because in a monastery, there's no need for a power hierarchy. For the most part, you guys just live in peace and harmony. Yeah, actually, one of the reflections that the Buddha invites us to do is to reflect that we are no longer part of the social hierarchy. So yeah, we also throw that outside of the window when we are there. And Daniel says, hello, I hope everyone is having a nice day. I'm just a teenager. Oh, I'm so glad just came across your page. We're very glad too. Welcome, Daniel. I have no support group nor community around on this journey. What would you recommend for me?
Well, this is actually a great start. This is one of the benefits of the internet. You can join programs like this regardless of where you're living, even if there's nowhere physical around you. But I would say see if you can look into local temples, monasteries, meditation groups. Since you're a teenager, I'm sure you know how to find things on the internet. And see what you can find. I also recommend the forum of suttacentral.net, SUTTA central.net, because there you can ask questions not just of people who have practiced for a while and read the suttas, but also monastics who go on there from time to time. There's also a Discord run by Bhante Jayasara. I don't remember how to join it, but if you Google Bhante Jayasara, Students of the Path, I think it's called, you can find that Discord channel, which is a great place actually to ask questions of all sorts of people, monastics, and have a supportive community that's virtual. That can be very helpful for the time being. If you want information on like these links, you can send us an email, info@mtcloud.org.
Great, thank you, Bhante. And Jay Kadrup asks, does your Sangha see ordination as something that is ideally a lifelong commitment or a training that serious practitioners can participate in for a time? I often have people ask me regards to temporary training.
So if people want to come here for monastic life, we would really rather that they commit to it fully. And the problem is that whenever someone's thinking like, oh, I'll just be a monk for a month or a year, they're usually not really fully committed to it. So there's lots of places in the world where you can go if you want temporary ordination, but this is not one of them.
And Mark asks, has Bhante Sudaso ever published an accurate translation of the 8 Noble Truths? When I Googled this, there were so many different ones. Where can I find this? Thanks.
Noble Eightfold Path, the next question. If you look at my sutta translations, there's a few places I translate it. But yeah, of course there's a bunch of different translations. And that's natural because we're translating from another language and it's impossible to get single categorical translations. So actually I translate the words differently depending upon how I'm feeling that day or the context that I'm speaking in. So it's better actually to learn them in Pali and to learn the meanings of these words. Actually, I'd say even for people who are not interested in learning the whole Pali language, it's still good to know in detail the meaning of a few of the common technical terms. And that includes each of the 8 aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. You should know in detail.
Thank you. And Nadine says Chinese isn't too hard. I find Pali much more difficult and highly admire those who can understand it. Well, I admire you and understand Chinese. And Celestino says, thank you, Bante. I would like to become a monk. Probably always wished it. By my karma, let me discover real Buddhism as Four Noble Truths only 6 years ago, at 50-year-old. Now at 56, I was told that I'm too old to become one. However, the path I wish to follow is Samma Sambuddha in the Sangha, or if not possible, by myself. Oh, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
If you go to Asia, it's easier to find places which will ordain older people. In Western countries where there's very few monasteries and they're usually not very well supported, then yeah, commonly there's an upper limit of about 50 years old. But in Asia, it's usually much more flexible depending on where you go. So don't give up. If you want to be a monk, it's still an option. You'll just probably have to go to Asia.
Or die down.
There are some places in the West, as Venerable Dangdai pointed out. Yeah, but mostly in Asia.
And M says, I actually practice shikantaza. I like the strict sitting posture of zazen, but I also feel very drawn to early Buddhism. Is it okay to mix these two together and ignore Mahayana scriptures? Thanks.
Yeah, of course you can mix them together. I do it all the time. As for ignoring Mahayana scriptures, and you can ignore whatever you want, I suppose, but actually there's a lot of value to be found in the Mahayana scriptures. You need to be careful reading them. And I recommend reading the Theravada Suttas first so you have a better understanding of the material. But you don't need to ignore the Mahayana scriptures. There's lots of really good stuff in there. Yeah, shikantaza is just a later term for meditation practice that's spoken about in the Pali Suttas. So you're not even mixing things together in that case. You'd just be practicing early Buddhism. It's fine.
Thank you. And Alex says, how were your monastic names chosen?
By Bante Sula, so
yeah, mine as well. Actually, technically by Venerable Panyavati, but under my seminary preceptor, but under the suggestion of Bhante Suttazo, who knew that the Soma Sutta was one of my favorite suttas. And also he knew about the sort of plight that I had with my lay name that was really long and nobody ever knew how to pronounce it. So I was getting ready to go through the same ordeal with my Pali name. It's like, oh, now after like 30 years of getting used to like spelling my name, now I have to start all the whole ordeal all over again. And then I got Soma. Wow. Basically, I got the equivalent of Jane. You know, I always wanted to have like something like Jane or Linda, Lisa, even better. Because everywhere you go in the world, you go to Italy, Lisa. You go to UK, Lisa. You go to France, Lisa. Like, it's perfect.
Actually, even China. That could
China,
be, you
Lisa.
could spell that perfectly with Chinese characters.
Yeah, but Giovanna, good luck with that. I had Jeho, Jayo, Jojo, Juho, and yeah, so many names in this country. But Soma is great. Oh, love it. Thank you, Bhante. Forever grateful. And
yeah, my name was chosen by my preceptor. So Suddhaso means pure aspiration. So that's the name he gave me. For the record, Sumino means one who has a happy and wholesome mind, and I named him that because it's a perfect description of him. Sumino is also the name of one of the previous Buddhas, which also gives him something to aspire to. Yeah.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. And Angela says, thank you, Venerables. Can you suggest good starter resources for learning Pali?
Send an email. If you send me an email, I'll give you some suggestions.
Okay. And Nancy asks, what is a preceptor?
It's the person who gives you monastic ordination. Any questions from Instagram?
We have one from Felipe de Matos. How do I overcome bad habits that bring me pain?
Bante sumano.
Well, first you have to recognize what those habits are, which it sounds like you're kind of at that point, maybe. So we can recognize that we have certain, like a general sense that there are certain habits we need to be working on, but do we actually know specifically what those habits are? If they're bringing you pain and you're still indulging in them, then obviously there's a certain self-destructive element to that, which actually is very common. It's very normal, especially if we don't have much self-worth or we don't believe that the way we're living our lives actually has any meaning, that we're headed towards, well, who cares? Then it's much easier to indulge in self-destructive tendencies and habits. So recognizing that is one. And then the other that the Buddha recommends is actually to recognize the gratification or the satisfaction that we get from that. So drinking, as an example, if you're someone who drinks yourself silly every day, recognize what's the pleasantness that I'm getting out of this. What does it allow me to do? It's not necessarily a pleasant sensation in the body, though it can be, but it could be the pleasure that comes from being able to block out hours of your day because you're asleep or blacked out. It could be the pleasure of not having to deal with whatever issues are going on in your life. So when you see that, you can also see, well, okay, this is what the mind is doing. This is what I'm doing. And then you pay attention to the drawbacks. So the drawback usually actually far outweighs the benefit. In the case of drinking yourself to the point of losing consciousness, you're slowly killing yourself, actually, which may be your goal. But you see that what you think is bringing relief, just like we had a sutta the other day that I described. I mentioned a sutta simile from the discourse of the Buddha, where the Buddha describes someone who rolls around in a pit of charcoal, thinking that that is bringing relief to their body, thinking that that's bringing relief to their illness, but it's just burning themselves. And that's what bad habits are like. There is the pleasure of indulging in the habit, but we're just burning ourselves. So really looking at this process unfolding, then the mind starts to recognize the silliness of it. It's something that can take weeks, months, years, decades, even lifetimes. But little by little, you start to loosen this hold that bad habits have over you by seeing them with wisdom and starting to actually regain control over what you do with your mind. Just actually making an honest question that you pose to yourself. How do I want to live? And is what I'm doing in line with that aspiration? If you want to live a self-destructive life because everything's meaningless, that's your choice. You can do that. But it sounds like you don't want to do that. You want to live a wholesome life. You want to experience happiness. So if that's what you want, then we need to start taking steps in that direction. And also recognize that it's not going to be easy. So in that case, it's helpful to, like you did, ask questions. But more than just ask questions once a week to people you don't even know, try and form a community or find a community of people that can actually support you. If what you're experiencing is addiction, then find a community of former or current addicts who are working on these issues, or even just, friends and family that you know. And you'll find that that combined with your individual practice actually helps a lot.
Thank you, Bante. And Daniel is asking, I like to study languages and I wish to travel when older. Which places in Asia would you recommend for me to travel to when I'm older and continue the journey? Thank you once again. Well, I definitely recommend Taiwan, and I definitely recommend, Thailand is beautiful. I would definitely want to learn Thai one day, but I'm actually frightened by Chinese, by anything that has a tone. Tone languages are a bit difficult for me. Sri Lanka. I highly recommend to visit. Pretty much any Buddhist country, really. I could my mind keeps on going and that place and that place and that place. So yeah, you can't go wrong.
I would say if you're interested in studying languages, there's 2 languages that you should learn first. Pali, Chinese. Everything else comes after that. No matter where you go in the Buddhist world, those 2 languages will be incredibly helpful.
Great, thank you, Bhante. And M says, rebirth actually requires extraterrestrials, doesn't it? Because the number of living beings is growing on Earth. Not true? Haha, serious question.
Yes, it's true. The implications of Buddhist thought inevitably lead to the conclusion that there are countless worlds of extraterrestrials. There's no getting around it. Fun fact, by the way, astrophysicists have come to the same conclusion. Just because of the sheer mind-bogglingly huge number of worlds in the universe. It's just inevitable. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And last question is from our friends, the Venerables at Tamadarini Monastery, our Bhikkhuni friends in California, who are asking how to conscientiously advocate for and support change in our communities with integrity and in harmony. Who would like to take this question?
You haven't answered one in a while.
No, I have answered.
Which one?
Traveling.
Well, the problem is that this is a 20-minute question when we're already over time. So actually, this should be a Bhante Sumino question because he's been giving such lovely short, quick answers.
I'll answer. I'll take it. How to conscientiously advocate and support change in our communities? I would say we should just do it. So instead of talking about it, we should just embrace it and practice what we preach. Instead of expecting change to come from the outside world, to actually try and create it in our backyard, or actually inside the living room, inside the kitchen, inside our bed, like inside our mind. All these different issues. I also realized, can talk so much about the difficulties of being having a female body in robes, but also a lot of these difficulties actually are inside my mind. So a lot of times I have to realize that the biggest forms of patriarchy are actually inside my mind, the internalized patriarchy that needs to be dismantled. It's a lot of work that needs to be done. So the change needs to start within. And then once it becomes done within, it's also easier to adjust the outside to match the within. So those are my thoughts.
I would also encourage you to be willing to speak out when you're experiencing unfair treatment. Be willing to bring it up. So, for example, if you go somewhere where they make the females sit in the back of the meditation hall, whereas the males get to sit in the front of the meditation hall, say, this is not okay. It's not okay to stick the female monks in the back. It's not acceptable. Or if they say the female monks have to sit on the floor, but the male monks get to sit on chairs, just say, this is not okay. It's not acceptable to mistreat people on such silly conditions. Because realistically, if nobody says anything, then nothing changes. So the first step is actually being willing to point out, being willing to say, actually, this is not the way things should be. This is not acceptable.
So I would say that if you have a bhikkhu friend, put him on the first line and get him to do the hard work. Because that's what a good ally can do. Get a little bit uncomfortable with their privilege and share space, share room.
Well said.
All right. You want to add anything?
No.
Oh, fine. Okay. So on that note, then we can end this evening. Thank you so much, friends, for joining us tonight, and thank you so much for to the venerables at the Mandarini Monastery, which you should all go and check out and support. They also have lots of great Dhamma talks online, and the abbots there are, or the abbesses, I think they go by abbesses, are incredible beings, Venerable Tattaloka and Venerable Sobanam. So you can check out what they're doing. It's a pretty incredible monastery. So thank you for asking that question and for tuning in. And we'll see you all again next week at Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. New York City time. And as usual, we'll have monk chat. We'll also have, not next week, but the week after that, Venerable Nisabo, a monk ordained in the Thai forest tradition, who will be staying with us for a few weeks. So you'll have an extra monastic to ask questions to. So he'll appear for monk chat, and he will also be leading together with Bhante Sudhaso an online retreat, which we'll announce in the next couple of days. So stay tuned, lots of great things coming up. All right. Have we ended 3 sadhus already? No. All right, let's end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, and Celestino, I missed your last question, so you can ask it again next week. Save it for next week.
Or send us an email.
Both.